Well, welcome to episode 13 of the Betterment Blueprint with your host, Tashawn Fernando. And today we're going to be talking about anxiety. Now, anxiety is something that I have dealt with for a long time. Ever since I was I would say like adolescent, like middle school is really when I started to feel it. And I have had a hell of a time really trying to get a hold of it. I think when I was younger, I didn't even really conceptualize it as anxiety because that would have been like early 2010. So I don't know, anxiety wasn't really as public of a word as it is now. I don't think I even had the vocabulary to explain that what I was feeling was anxious. But I would feel it about everything. I'd feel it about school. I'd feel it about relationships. I'd feel it about my family. And I just feel it about myself. It's just kind of the state that I lived in. And I kind of just stayed that way. I just kind of thought that that was what life was like. And then I remember once I got a little bit older, getting into college. And I think the anxiety both increased and decreased at the same time. It increased in the sense that anytime I got into a relationship specifically, my anxiety would skyrocket. Like it would get really, really, really bad. And looking back, it's because I really, really, really needed to be in a relationship when I was in college. And so anytime I got into one, I was so desperate to stay in it. Or whenever I was about to get into one, I was so desperate to make it work. And that need, that desire to try to control that situation is what really set off my anxiety. And it really only got worse from there. I don't remember being too anxious about school and stuff like that. I think that sort of started to peel off as I got older and older. But my anxiety around relationships just got worse and worse. And I think the worst it ever got was after I moved to Austin, which I think I was 23 at the time. 22 or 23 is like a year after college. And I don't know, I guess it just felt more real. And I would meet a lot of people. I mean, it's Austin. It's a younger person's city. And I would meet lots of great people. But every time I would get close to being in a relationship or I'd get into one, my mental state just went down the drain. And I really had no idea how to deal with it. And the way that I approached it was actually by getting into therapy. I hired a therapist. Not the first time that I've hired a therapist, but the first time I've hired a therapist specifically for anxiety about relationships. And her approach was really interesting. I mean, she took a deep. We went back to my childhood, which is probably not that surprising if you've been in therapy before. And we really started to explore why I was the way that I was. And that was really helpful. I learned a lot about myself. And it helped me understand a little bit more about why I would get so anxious about being in a relationship. And it's kind of a combination of my like social, cultural, and familial upbringing. I mean, the story is basically that when I was younger, relationships were something that were so totally out of bounds for me. Familiarly and culturally, where my parents grew up, which is in Sri Lanka, you just don't really date the same way that you do like kids do in America. Here it's really normal to date people and to date around and to explore and find what you like. That's the norm. That's kind of how that's what the dating process is supposed to be like in the United States. But in Sri Lanka, where my parents grew up, that's not at all the case. You don't date around. You don't even really like date per se until you get a little bit older, like in that college age or beyond. And if you did date somebody, it wasn't to like see if you liked them, to see if maybe this was worth pursuing further. If you were dating someone, it's because you wanted to marry them. You didn't even get to the dating part until after you had gotten to know somebody. And that was just the norm. That was the cultural norm. So my family moving here and me being the first kid that they had to raise in the United States, there was this clash of the old cultural norms and the new cultural norms. And I was trying to fit in with the kids around my age who were dating and having girlfriends and stuff like that. And my parents, unknowingly, because they weren't around kids at that point, they didn't understand what the norm was here, were trying to raise me the same way that they had been raised, right? Which, how else would they know how to raise a kid? And because of that, I was never really allowed to date or even have like female friends when I was younger. I had them, but it was always in secret, and it was always the most like I would get into so much trouble when I would get caught. And it turned dating into, instead of just being this normal part of something that you do when you're younger, instead of just being this low pressure activity of how you get to know somebody and how you express interest in somebody, it became this extremely high pressure, high risk, high reward kind of experience. And I don't know, I think when you treat something like that with a kid, they're just going to want it more, right? If you have a kid and you tell them that like, oh, social media is so bad and you're absolutely not allowed to use it, it's going to ruin your life, which is not necessarily false, right? But if you treat social media like that with a child and you don't actually expose them to it, one, they're going to be really, really curious about it. And two, when they do eventually get exposed, because they're going to get exposed because everyone else uses social media, right? They're going to go so overboard. It's like that classic story of kids who were really sheltered when they were younger, and then they grow up and go to college and they just lose themselves in the partying and the drugs and the sex. And it's just like, that happens to every kid that is super like boxed up because they're not exposed to any of that stuff. And then when they are exposed to it, they go nuts. They just can't help themselves. It's like a drug. And so I think relationships for me got put on a pedestal, and they became almost like this drug for me that I just craved. And because it was so forbidden and so off limits, it became like the thing that I wanted the most in life as a kid. And my experiences, I mean, looking back, kind of support that, because I would just jump from relationship to relationship. Sometimes I would really like the person. Sometimes it would just be like kind of interested in them. But almost always, the main reason why I was dating somebody is because I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to be in a relationship. I needed to be in a relationship. And as I've got older and older, I think another thing that was at play is that when you're younger, it's like relatively easy to get into relationships because you're just forced to be around people that are your age because you're in school. And school is set up in such a way that you're just around people that are your age. But once you get older and you move out and you're no longer in high school or college or middle school or whatever, some sort of organized school system, it's much more random. Because of that randomness, you have to be a lot more intentional about finding a relationship. And that just by very nature makes it a little bit more difficult to find one. And so that scarcity just made the need to be in a relationship worse, and the anxiety just got worse and worse and worse. So anyways, that's just a little bit of background about why my anxiety was centered around relationships specifically. But I'm not actually here to talk about the relationship. My problem with relationships. I'm here to talk about anxiety and how I dealt with that. And the interesting thing is that my anxiety because I didn't really deal with it properly at any point. I mean, the therapy was a good step, but the solutions that I found in therapy were relatively short-lived in that I didn't do anything to keep them going. I didn't do anything to make them last. I just went to therapy, got a little bit better, and then as soon as I stopped going to therapy, I kind of just started living my life the same way I had been before therapy. And so my life just went back to being the same way it was before therapy. And that culminated in some really intense panic attacks when I was in Mexico City, traveling with some friends. And it's interesting because that trip didn't really have much to do with relationships when I was experiencing the panic attacks. I was with a bunch of friends. But my anxiety I mismanaged it. I mishandled it. And it just got worse and worse and worse. Surprise, surprise. Until it manifested as panic attacks. And man, were those panic attacks uncomfortable. They were crazy. I felt like I was losing my mind. Like I was having a heart attack. I had no idea what was happening. I remember the first one, I got into an Uber with my friends. And I just suddenly just descended on me. My heart started racing faster and faster and faster. And it got a little bit hard to breathe. And I didn't know what was going on because I'd never experienced a panic attack before. But luckily, my best friend at the time, he was training to be a doctor. And he didn't diagnose me because he's not allowed to do that, but he guessed as to the fact that I was having a panic attack. And I, after that experience, called one of my other friends who had experienced panic attacks before and described it to them, and they were like, yeah, that's that's definitely a panic attack. And then 2 days later, when I was even more sleep deprived and more anxious than I was when I had the first panic attack, I had a second one, and that one was way worse. I was crying, and I couldn't control my emotions. It was intense. And I was on a bus, and I didn't want to show all of this emotion to all of these strangers or even to my friends. So I remember putting a jacket over my head and just huddling under the jacket and quietly trying to have a panic attack. And yeah, it sucked. But the saving grace of that situation is that I learned a ton from that whole experience. It gave me a lot of perspective because I understood that if I didn't deal with my anxiety properly, if I didn't really try to understand it and find ways to manage it, that was going to be my future. I was just going to descend into a world of more panic attacks and more consistent states of anxiety, which I didn't really want. It kind of launched me into this journey of trying to understand more. And so that's what I'm going to be sharing with you. I'm going to learn. I'm going to talk to you about what I've learned. And again, I'm not a medical professional. I'm just a guy. Okay, I'm just an anxious guy. So I'm just going to tell you about my experience and what I learned. And, take it for what you will. Integrate into your own life what you like and forget the rest. It's just one person's perspective. And if you know more about anxiety than me, please share in the comments. Teach the rest of us. I would love to learn more because while my relationship with anxiety has gotten a lot better, it's totally not gone. And I'm sure there are some people listening to this that have more experience than I do with it. So we would love to hear from you. And I'm going to kind of approach this whole anxiety thing from 4 different sides. From a mental approach, from an emotional approach, from a physical approach, and from a social approach. And so, starting with a mental approach. And what I mean by that is basically what sort of mindsets do you need to have to help you deal with anxiety? Well, we have to start with what anxiety is and what causes it. And it's really important to understand that our brains are basically these state-of-the-art self-defense systems. And they've evolved over thousands of years to identify threats and to eliminate threats. But part of living in a modern society now is that we're not dealing with the same sort of threats that we used to have to face. Right now, we're not worried so much about predators and getting eaten and subsisting for food as we are so much about, keeping our jobs and paying the bills and fitting in with our friends and family and finding something meaningful to do with our lives. Right? It's like Maslow's triangle. We've moved beyond the first two steps of the triangle, and we're kind of in that upper half. And our brain, because evolution is such a slow process, we haven't really evolved the right automatic processes for all of that stuff. And so a lot of our automatic processes are antithetical or antagonistic to what we're trying to accomplish in this modern day era. And we have to supplement the evolution that our brain has already gone through with good mindsets to help it thrive in these last few stages of being a human being. And what I learned about anxiety after doing a lot of introspection and learning is that anxiety stems from trying to control that which you cannot control. Anytime there's something in your life that you care about, and you care about so much that you want to control it, right? Going back to me with my relationships, I wanted to keep that person in the relationship. I wanted them to like me. But those aren't things that I can actually control, right? I can actually control what somebody else does. I can't control what somebody else thinks or feels. All I can do is control who I am and how I show up. And everything else is just up to the universe, up to that person. And when you try to control something that you can't actually control, you just end up feeling powerless. And if you feel powerless for long enough, you end up feeling hopeless. And if you end up feeling hopeless for long enough, then your life really starts to take a downward spiral. And so there's two strategies here. We have to find a way, on one hand, to expand our sense of control, right? Because chances are, yes, while the only things we can actually control are our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. Those are the only things we can actually control: thoughts, feelings, and actions. Chances are we're not actually taking full control of those three things. We're probably just, for the most part, I know I am a lot of the times, just letting them run the show without really putting any intention into them. And on the other hand, the things that we can't control, which is everything other than our thoughts, actions, and feelings, we have to find a way to release that control and let it be, because we can't control it, right? It's all just an illusion in our head, that sense of control. So we have to find a way to break that illusion and find a more realistic point of view to approach the world with. So the way that we expand control is through something called radical responsibility. I call it taking 100% responsibility, but there's lots of different names for it. Jocko Willink wrote a whole book on it called Extreme Ownership. And psychologists call it having an internal locus of control. But no matter what you call it, it's always about the same idea, which is that wherever you point the blame in your life is where the power in your life is. So if you blame the government, you give the government all of the power. If you blame your family, you give your family all of the power. If you blame your friends or your school system, you give your friends and the school system all of the power over your life. And we do this a lot. I still do this. As conscious as I try to be of it, I still do it all of the time. And one of the ways, most recently, in which I realized I've been putting a lot of blame on other people and not taking responsibility is with my teaching. Because as a teacher, there's so many things going on. And you probably have been a student before, and so you probably understand to some degree that in a classroom, there's a lot going on, right? There's 20 to 30 students usually, and they're all kind of on their own wavelength, trying to do their own thing. And while they might be paying attention or engaged with the material, the level of engagement and the intention behind that engagement varies between every student. And as a teacher, it's my job to get everybody on the same page and to teach everyone the same material to a particular standard, right? And it can be really easy as a teacher, because that can be a really overwhelming experience, trying to manage 20 to 30 different people and get them to do the same task is difficult. And so it can be easy to blame the student. Oh, this student isn't paying attention, or this student doesn't show up on time, or this student doesn't really care about school. So what can I do about that? What control do I have? And while it's true that I don't have any control over how much a student cares, or what time a student shows up to class, or how focused a student is, I don't have control over that. I have a lot of control over my influence on those aspects. And I haven't been taking as much responsibility for that influence as I should be. Because while I don't have any control over how early or how late someone shows up to class, I do have control over my influence on them, right? I can talk to students about showing up late. I can reward them for showing up on time or showing up early. I can punish them for showing up late. Right? I have influence over those aspects, even though I can't control that literal thing, right? And if someone's not paying attention, again, I can reward them for paying attention and punish them for not. I can talk to them and develop a relationship with them. And just by the fact of the matter of us having more of a relationship, they'll probably pay more attention and be more interested in the material, because I'm no longer some random dude teaching chemistry. Now I'm actually someone that cares about you, that's teaching chemistry. And that's a different experience for a student. Right? But all of that goes away when I say, oh, the student doesn't really care. I can't do anything about that. I lose all of the control, and I give all of the power over to the student. And now the student is completely in control of whether or not they pay attention, right? And that's not necessarily bad, but I cease to have any influence over them. And that's my job as a teacher, is to have influence, is to use my influence to push people to make good decisions about their education. And once I became aware of that, and I started to make and take more responsibility over my influence over things, my experience of teaching has only gotten better. Because now I'm trying again, right? Now students are responding to my influence in one way or another. And it's not necessarily easy. It's not easy. It takes work. I think a lot of people shy away from taking responsibility because it takes work. But it doesn't make sense to shy away from responsibility because it takes work, because that assumes that it doesn't take work not to take responsibility. Do you know how stressful and how frustrating it is to live your life in such a way that you don't have any control? You're just at the whim of everyone else's thoughts and feelings and your circumstances. That sucks. It sucks to feel like you have no influence over your own life, like you're just a leaf in the wind. That sucks. That takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of energy out of you. And when it comes to taking responsibility, yeah, that takes work, right? You're going to have to start blaming yourself for a lot of things. You're going to have to start taking responsibility, which means you're going to have to do more. But you'll actually start to solve the problems in your life, right? Students are showing up late, less and less. They're being focused more and more. For me, for my example, right? And that makes my job so much easier. Yeah, it takes a little bit more work, but now I'm actually seeing results. So it's totally worth it. So both approaches are mentally and emotionally and physically draining. Like, they both take work, but one shows results and the other one doesn't. And I think it's pretty clear which one is the better option. And then when it comes to releasing control, this one is tough. This one is really, really hard, because we are wired as human beings to want to control situations, because we want to feel safe. We want to feel secure, and what better way to feel safe and secure than having total control over the situation? But as human beings, we don't have that much control. In some ways, we are kind of like a plane, just like floating in the wind, like a glider plane, right? And we have some control over the rudder and the flaps and the ailerons and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, we're still kind of subject to the wind. Or maybe if you're not familiar with flying, I think a boat with a sailboat makes a lot more sense. You're just kind of like a sailboat on the sea, and you just have to ride the waves. And yeah, you've got your sail and you've got your rudder and you've got oars and you can kind of steer, but at the end of the day, like the ocean's going to do what the ocean's going to do and you just got to deal with it. And that's kind of what being a human being is, right? But the boat doesn't try to control the ocean. The boat doesn't try to control what waves, how high the waves are, or if it's raining or any of that stuff. It just focuses on riding the waves as best it can. And that's how it gets from point A to point B. And you've got to do the same thing. And what that looks like as a human being, because we need some sort of replacement, because we are all imbued with this fear of uncertainty. And while that fear isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just kind of gets in the way sometimes. And it causes a lot of anxiety. You have to start replacing uncertainty with curiosity. So when there's a situation where you don't know what's going to happen, you have to consciously make a decision to recognize, A, that you're probably looking at it from a negative point of view. And B, choose to then look at it with curiosity. And I use the word curiosity on purpose because there's a connotation with curiosity as sort of like wonder, excitement, curiosity, right? All those words, they go together. And this is the same case. This is exactly what you need to do. I can look at my day, right? It's like 7:47 in the morning right now on a Tuesday. And I got to go to work. And I have no idea what's going to go on at work, right? I have no idea what mood the students are going to be in. I have no idea what's going to happen today. I have my lesson sort of planned and like, that's really all I know. And I can choose to look at the day with negativity and pessimism and be like, this is going to suck. Like, this is going to take so much work and I'm going to have to teach so much and blah, blah, blah. Or I can look at it with positivity and optimism. Like, this is going to be kind of interesting. I'm kind of curious to see if like I'm able to teach this properly today because I've never taught this concept before. I'm curious to see if the students get it. And if they don't, I'm curious to try new things. I'm interested to see what's going to work and what's not going to work. And in both scenarios, if I'm being optimistic or I'm being pessimistic, neither is more right or more wrong because I'm just guessing, right? I have no idea what's going to happen. I can't tell the future. I'm just choosing to look at it either with pessimism or with optimism. And it's totally a choice. It's a choice that we don't always exert control over. Sometimes we get into a habit of being pessimistic. And at first, it's going to take a lot of effort to turn yourself into more of an optimistic, curious person. But once you start to do it, it too becomes sort of like a habit. And thankfully, I find myself now, when I look forward to a day at school, it's usually either neutral or positive, but it's very rarely negative anymore. And the really beautiful thing is that your mindset with which you go into a scenario is totally going to affect your perception. So if I go into the day with this pessimistic attitude, anytime anything goes wrong, I'm going to immediately go back to my previously held belief that today was going to be bad anyways. And I'm going to be like, this is exactly what I was talking about. I knew this was going to happen. I knew today was going to suck. And now all of a sudden it sucks. And all of the good things that are going to happen, because the day is always a mixed bag, right? There's going to be some bad things and there's going to be some good things. All the good things that happen, I'm not really going to care much about because they're not really going to support my preconceived notion that today is going to suck. But if I go into it with a more of an optimistic attitude, then anytime something goes wrong, I'm going to be like, the day was never going to be perfect. Some things were going to go wrong. Oh, well. And when things go right, I'm going to be like, see, this is exactly what I was freaking talking about. Today was going to be awesome. I knew this was going to be a good time. And just a bit of an aside, this is why trying to approach life with this negative point of view so that you're not disappointed is a terrible way to approach life, because it's going to set yourself up for failure. It's going to set yourself up for negativity. It's going to set yourself up to pick up on all of the bad things that are going on. And yeah, you might not be disappointed, but it's not going to help you have a better time. You're going into the situation with a negative attitude, so you're only going to pick up on the negative things. And the positive things that do happen, they're not going to have that much of an effect on you. But if you go into a situation with a positive attitude and you're curious and you're excited about what may happen, then yeah, you might get a little disappointed, but all of the good things that will happen will have so much more of an effect on you. And honestly, if you're worried about being disappointed, then just go into the situation with a neutral point of view. Because while curiosity has sort of like this positive connotation, it really is just a neutral thing. You're just like, I wonder what's going to happen. I got no idea. Might be good, might be bad. I don't know. And that's sort of this like neutral middle ground where you're not really risking getting disappointed because you're just curious, right? You don't have any expectations to disappoint. I think it's a better strategy than going in with this negative point of view. So the next approach is the emotional approach, okay? And this is probably one of the more important approaches because part of what makes anxiety suck so much is that we think we're not supposed to be anxious. To be human is to be emotional. And feeling emotion is what makes being human worth it. That's what makes being human fun. It's what makes it an adventure, because if we didn't have emotions, we would just be like rocks. We would just be here. We'd be doing our things, and we wouldn't feel good or bad about it. And it's easy to be thankful for emotions when things are feeling good. It's not so easy to do it when we're feeling bad. But it's important to remember that the same part of you that feels so much pain and so much depression and so much anxiety at times is the same part of you that is capable of loving deeply, of finding the joy in the smallest things in life, and in generating courage and strength. And so as much as emotion can hurt, emotion is also what makes the world bright. It's what adds color to our lives. And to reject that, to deny that, or pretend like your emotions don't exist, it's a sad way to live your life. And I get it. When things are going poorly, I feel the same way. I wish I didn't have emotions too. But the good is good because it exists in juxtaposition to the bad. And the bad is so bad because it exists in juxtaposition to the good. Right? Bad feels bad because your life was good at some point. And good feels good because your life felt bad at some point. We need both in order to feel one or the other. And they depend on each other. And I say all of this just to point out that you should feel your feelings. You have feelings for a reason, and you should feel them. And I would even go so far as to say it's your responsibility to feel them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to believe them. Or just like a team leader who has to make a decision based off of more than just one team member's opinions, you have to be a leader in your own life and make decisions based off of more than just your own feelings. Because there's all these other variables at play, right? There's logic, there's other people's feelings, there's the realities of life, there's context, there's all these other things you should be taking into account when you're making a decision. And not going off of solely just emotion. And if you are someone who makes decisions solely off of emotion, no shame, no judgment whatsoever. Because I used to be that person too. But I just found that my life ended up being this crazy roller coaster of highs and lows. And I found myself craving stability. And and I just wanted my life to feel normal for once. I was so tired of the ups and downs. And once I started to make decisions off of more than just emotion, that's when I really started to find that peace and stability. Because our emotions, they're unreliable. They add joy and excitement to our lives, and they add depression and pain and anxiety to our lives, right? And they're the color, but they're not the only thing that's important. So once I had my panic attacks in Mexico, I stopped treating my anxiety like it was a trespasser. And literally, this sounds kind of weird, but whenever I would feel that anxiety in my chest, which is where I always feel it, I always feel this pressure in my chest, just increasing and increasing. I literally will say out loud or in my head if I'm around other people, "Welcome back, old friend. I was wondering when you were going to stop by." And I say that because I want to mentally prepare myself for the anxiety, and more importantly, what that message the anxiety is trying to tell me. Because anxiety, I learned, is a part of our self-warning system. It's there to tell us that something is off. Something is not right here. Something needs fixing. Sometimes there's nothing actually off out in the real world, but something off out here internally. Maybe our mindset is off. But there's always a reason for that anxiety. And I found that listening to the anxiety, instead of trying to run from it, instead of trying to kill it or fight it, inviting it in, making space for it, really feeling it and trying to understand, what are you trying to tell me? What's wrong right now? What needs to be changed or fixed? And I found anxiety I've come to view it as less and less of a bug of the human condition and more as a feature. Because it really is actually quite valuable. It really has taught me a lot about what to do and what not to do. Nowadays, I get anxiety a lot when I'm not following my schedule, where I've set some sort of intention for the day and I have a moment of weakness and I pull out my phone. Or I have a moment of weakness and I boot up the PS5 or pull up Netflix. Or lately, for me, it's been Disney Plus. That's when that anxiety hits me. And it's not just because of those activities. There's nothing wrong with watching Disney Plus or playing on the PS5 or pulling out my phone. It's the context in which I'm doing it. When I know there's something else I'm supposed to be doing and I'm living out of integrity with how I want to be living, that's when the anxiety hits me. And when I listen to that anxiety and I'm like, yeah, sorry, man, like, my bad, let me get back on task, the anxiety goes away. And when I'm done, then when I pull out the PS5 or I boot up Disney Plus, there's no problems. Because now I'm doing it in the right context. There's no reason to feel anxious. And so the anxiety doesn't hit. I've actually found it to be a really good emotional indicator of what I should and shouldn't be doing. So the next time anxiety hits you, instead of trying to fight it, I want you to think of a rock in a stream. And sometimes that stream's flow is high, sometimes it's low, sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow. But the rock doesn't care because the rock is just there. It just is. And that's all. And when your emotions come up, I want you to be like that rock in the stream. Don't try to fight the flow of emotions, but don't let it drag you along with it either. Just be there. Just be steady and strong and reliable and consistent. And let the emotions flow through you and flow around you like a rock in a stream. Hey, if this is hitting home for you right now, do me a favor and like the video or hit subscribe. I make episodes like this every week to help people who are working through real stuff just like you. The other approach is, of course, the physical approach. And I think this is the one that most people and myself have heard the most of, like when watching my own YouTube videos and doing my own research on, when I was trying to figure out how to deal with my own anxiety, this is what I got and came into contact with the most. And I think it's important. I do think that the mental and emotional, the mindset that you have beforehand is really important, because if you use the physical tools without the right mindsets, the changes tend to be fairly impermanent and very temporary. But if you do it with the right mindsets, then these physical activities can be real game changers. And the reason they're such game changers is because while anxiety may start in the mind, it lives in the body. That's where it actually manifests, right? And we know this because we know what anxiety feels like. We feel the sweaty palms and the kind of like antsiness and the discomfort in the stomach. And like I said, I always feel this pressure in my chest and it gets a little hard to breathe. And that's our body reacting to that anxiety signal from our mind. But because the mind-body connection is not just a one-way street, because it flows both ways, we can actually find ways to calm our physical body down, and in turn let our minds know that everything is okay, that there's no reason to be freaking out right now, no reason to be stressing. Everything is okay. And our mind will start to calm down. It's pretty cool. It's actually great because I think most people view anxiety as this like, I've got to fight it up here in my head. And that will in turn affect my body and I'll stop feeling so terrible. But you don't necessarily have to do that. You can do that. That is one way to do it. But a lot of times it's a lot easier to control our physical bodies than our mental and emotional states. So, like I said at the beginning, I'm not a medical professional. Okay, so I'm just going to share what's worked really well for me. And the 3 things that have worked really well for me is breathing exercises, meditation, and walking. And at different stages of my life, I kind of leaned on each of these. When I was younger, it was walking. I would walk a ton. And actually during college, which is one of the most anxious times of my life, I walked pretty much every day. That's how I started my day. And I would call them my anxiety walks. Because if I didn't do them, I would be anxious as hell. And something about walking just helps me process my feelings and my emotions. Because for me, it would hit me right when I woke. I would wake up, I'd open my eyes, I'd have like this half-second moment of peace. And then where I was at in life or what was going on in my life would hit me and the anxiety would just descend upon me. And so those walks really helped me deal with that stuff early on in the day so I could enjoy the rest of the day a little bit more. I think it really helps to walk somewhere where you actually enjoy walking. But I think in general, just the act of walking itself is pretty helpful. And at least it was for me. Then once I got a little bit older, especially once I moved here to Austin, meditation became really big for me. And there's so many, everyone always thinks that meditation is like you sit on a chair or whatever, or you sit on the ground with your legs crossed and you close your eyes and you focus on your breathing. And that is like one of a million different ways to meditate. And all the different ways are so effective in different ways. It really depends on what you need. And I cannot recommend using guided meditations enough. Find an app that you like. Find a YouTuber that you like. Find a podcast that you like. And just dive into the world of meditation. Because it is so good. It works so well. It really genuinely just calms everything down. And it keeps you calm for a long time. And it doesn't take that long. And I think the one thing I really want to say about this is that you can't do it wrong. Everyone always, when they first try meditating, or maybe they've tried a couple times, they always say, I think I'm doing it wrong. Like my mind isn't clear. And it's like there's this slog you have to walk through before you get to the clear open field. And it's a process. And sometimes it's a multi-day, multi-week, multi-month process, depending on where your mental state is. And it's not going to feel great right off the start. It's a skill. You have to build it. And you're going to suck at first. That's a part of the process. Your mind is just going to be so jumbled. And you're going to be getting hit with thoughts 1,000,000 times a second. And maybe in a week after practicing, it'll just hit you 1,000 times a second. And then maybe just hundreds of times a second. And then tens. And then ones. And then maybe eventually, finally, your mind will actually start to clear. But don't go into it with this expectation that meditation is the silver bullet. It's a skill. It's a highly effective skill, but you have to build it just like any other skill. So commit. If you're interested in it and you think it's something that might work for you, commit for a little while. No matter how frustrating it is or how little it seems to be working, just commit to it and really give it a chance. And now, for me, the thing that I've really been doing a lot of that has really been helping me is breathing. And I know it sounds silly because we're breathing all the time, but how often do you really deeply breathe. Like just to really, where you can literally hear the breathing. Even just doing it now, I mean, it just feels so good. But I've started breathing exercises every hour of the day. I use it sort of as like a little brain and mental physical break, just to kind of chill for a sec. And it really, really, really helps. And it's so easy, and you can just do it anywhere at any time. I've had to kind of set reminders because honestly, it's really hard to remember to breathe every hour. It kind of works for me, like, because my school is periodized. So there's a first through fourth period every 90 minutes. We change periods, and there's a lunch in there as well. So I just do it at the end or at the beginning of class. And nobody notices, nobody cares. I'm just breathing. Why would anyone care? But it really helps calm my mind, re-energize my body. And again, there's 1.5 million videos out there about different types of breathing. I like to use box breathing. There's 1.5 million videos out there about meditation. And then, of course, walking. Hopefully you know how to do that, or you are able to do that. So once you have experimented a little bit and figured out some things that work for you, I want to challenge you to go past that. And don't just be reactive to your anxiety. Be proactive. Part of the reason why I was walking every single day while I was in college was because I knew the anxiety was going to hit. And I didn't want to wait for it to hit. I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to get myself in a good head state ahead of time so that the anxiety wouldn't hit in the first place. And if you decide to meditate, do it on a daily basis. If you're going to work on your breathing practices, do it on an hourly or daily. Make it a daily thing. Make it a habit so that you're doing it every day, so that you're keeping your body in a calm state. So the anxiety is way less likely to hit. And then the last approach is the social approach. And I leave this for last because I think it's probably the most uncomfortable. Everything else is kind of private. The mental approach, the feeling your feelings, the physical things that you do. You can kind of do that and no one really has to know what's going on. But telling people about what you're going through and what your anxieties are is by far the most powerful thing you can do. Because anxiety, just like everything else we try to hide about ourselves, only gets worse in the dark. The less we talk about it, the louder it gets. And anxiety, the reason it's destroying people is not the anxiety itself, but the belief that they feel like they're the only people that are feeling it, because we don't really talk about it. People talk about it in like public contexts nowadays. You know, people will do seminars on it and YouTube videos and podcasts, but how often do we sit and talk to our friends about our anxieties and what's been bothering us and what we're going through? It's not very common. But talking about it brings such a massive relief because it puts it out there into the world and it helps get it out of your head and out of your heart. So I really encourage you to talk to your friends, talk to your family. And if you feel like they may not be open to that sort of thing, I urge you to be courageous, because I guarantee you they probably are. They're just waiting for someone else to bring it up first because it's scary. You got to be the courageous one and bring it up first. Every single time I have talked to someone about my anxieties or about my periods of depression or about my periods of suicidal ideation, every single time the other person has said me too. Every single time. Maybe it's to more of a degree than what I've experienced. Maybe it's to less of a degree. But it's always there. It's just something that we as humans have to go through. And there's absolutely no reason we have to go through it alone. Now, if you really don't feel like talking to your friends or your family is an option, then I really recommend therapy or a life coach. Because you're paying those people and they're professionals. So they'll do a good job. They'll listen to you. And on the off chance that you get a therapist or a life coach that you don't really vibe with, find another one. Fire them. You don't have to stick with someone you don't really like. They're not your friend. You can just get rid of them. Find someone that you vibe with, because that is really, really important. And if you don't have the funds to fund paying for a therapist or a life coach, then seriously, I recommend an AI. Because the AIs nowadays, they're literally getting better every single day. And they're actually so good at listening and breaking things down and reflecting and just helping you feel heard. And I don't think it really matters that it's another human being. I think the experience will always be better if it's another human being. But what's really relieving is getting it out. And so if you're saying that to a robot, I mean, that's fine. That's totally fine. Just do it. You don't even have to tell anybody. Maybe you think it's weird. Maybe it is weird. You don't have to tell anybody. Just do it. Just see how you feel. Just try it out. My friend the other day, he told me that him and his girlfriend, they were having a fight. And so they pulled out ChatGPT and they used ChatGPT as like a intermediary, like a couples therapy thing between them. And that fight that probably would have gone on for a couple of hours or maybe even a couple of days, they solved in like 30 minutes flat. And then they moved on because they were able to cut through all of the crap and all of the ego and all of the sensitivities and just say what needed to be said. I really think it's worth giving a shot. And the last thing is, I just want to remind you that you're not alone. Anxiety, depression, pain, whatever it is that you're going through, you are not alone. We are all going through that. All of us. Every single one of us. And if we're not going through it right now, then we have in the past. And if we haven't in the past, then we will in the future. It's a part of being a human being. And there's nothing wrong with you for experiencing those things. I'm rooting for you. Hey guys, Tashawn here. If you stuck around this long, seriously, thank you so much. It means a lot. If you got some value out of this video, or you could think of someone who might need to hear the message themselves, please send it their way. Like, subscribe, all of that. But most importantly, keep taking care of yourself. I'll see you guys next week.